My family has a winter place up in New Hampshire, perfect for skiing and snowboarding. It's perched right at the top of a steep hill, totally surrounded by thick woods. The closest neighbors are a good way up the road, completely out of sight from our spot. Outside, there's a large storage barn where we keep all our snowboarding equipment, along with outdoor tools like shovels, rakes, and other general gear. We always lock the barn tight whenever we leave the property, but once we arrive and unlock it, we usually leave it open for the whole visit. It feels safe enough, and we never worried much about anyone bothering our stuff while we're actually staying there. The house itself is spacious, technically 3 floors, with the top floor being a loft-style master bedroom that's strictly for my parents, off-limits for me, my siblings, or any guests. This particular weekend, I was heading up with my friend Melissa, and I was excited to teach her how to snowboard, as she'd never tried it before. We had a beginner board and all the right gear waiting for her at the house. Because our property sits on such a steep incline, we'd actually carved out our own little practice slope over the yews. It's great for sledding or getting the hang of snowboarding basics before hitting the real mountain. So before taking Melissa to the resort, I figured it was the perfect place to start her lessons. We geared up and headed to the top of our hill. I went down first, slowly showing her the basic stance and movements. On her first try, she took a tumble immediately, just like you'd expect. But Melissa was really determined. She kept getting back up and trying again. Each run down the hill and she improved a little bit. We'd reach the bottom, hike back up, and go again. At one point, while catching our breath halfway up, we both clearly heard a man's voice call out from the woods nearby. It sounded like it was aimed right at us, and it said, "Hello?" We froze, looking around totally confused. All we could see were endless trees and the deep, undisturbed blanket of snow covering the forest floor. You'd think someone would stand out against all that white, but nope, nothing moved, no one was visible. I yelled back, "Is someone there?" Only silence answered us. That deep, heavy quiet you only get in a remote winter place. It definitely unsettled both Melissa and me. We decided to head back up to the house and go inside. I couldn't figure out who it might have been. The driveway of the nearest neighbor we passed hadn't been shoveled recently, and the folks further up the hill wouldn't have any reason to come down through the dense woods like that. Trying to stay calm, I told Melissa it was probably just a random person out for a winter hike. That seemed like the least worrying explanation. Later, we headed out to my favorite local diner for an early dinner, then picked up some groceries for the next few days. By the time we got back, it was getting dark. Then we made dinner at the house and then decided to relax by the fire pit in the backyard. We had some quiet music playing. Then we both distinctly heard the crunch-crunch sound of footsteps in the snow, not too far off in the darkness beyond the firelight. I quickly turned the music off. Even with the fire crackling, the footsteps were clear. But just as we focused, the sound stopped, and I asked Melissa for her phone so I could use both our flashlights to scan the tree line. I called out again, "Is someone there?" This really spooked Melissa, and she asked if we could please just go back inside. We gathered our things and didn't go outside again that night. The next morning, I woke up briefly as Melissa got out of bed. I was still half asleep and drifted off again when I properly woke up later. She wasn't back. I checked the time and it was already past 9 a.m. I got up and went to the bedroom window, pulling back the curtain to look outside, and my eyes went straight to the storage barn. The door was wide open. Then I saw it, the visible puff of someone's breath in the cold air blowing out from behind the open barn door. Then I figured Melissa must be out there getting something. I opened the window slightly and called out, "Melissa?" Her voice answered me immediately, but it came from inside the house, from the living room downstairs. A chill went right through me. I kept watching that puff of breath escaping the barn door. I leaned out the window and yelled towards the barn, "Hey, who's in there?" I waited a few seconds, then slammed the window shut and ran downstairs. Melissa was standing near the couch, looking worried, not watching TV anymore.
I rushed to the back door and yanked it open, just in time to see the back of someone dressed all in black sprinting from the barn towards the woods. I scrambled for my boots, but by the time I got them on and got outside, they were long gone, vanished into the trees. I went straight to the barn to check if anything was missing. Everything seemed to be exactly where it should be, nothing taken. I locked the barn door securely. Looking at the ground, I could clearly see footprints leading from the woods to the barn and then back into the woods again. Following them into the forest was something I wasn't about to do. After our nerves settled a bit, we had breakfast and headed to the mountain for the day. Melissa actually picked up snowboarding surprisingly well. We had a great time and planned one more day on the slopes tomorrow. Back at the house that evening, we cooked a steak dinner and put on a movie. We definitely weren't keen on sitting outside in the dark again, not after last night and the morning scare. In the middle of the night, I woke up to Melissa shaking my shoulder. She whispered to listen urgently. We lay there in complete silence for about half a minute. Then we heard it. A long, drawn-out voice calling from outside. "Help me!" It sounded strained and eerie. Melissa was really upset. Then the voice came again. "Help me!" I got out of bed and moved towards the window. Melissa begged me not to open the curtain. I whispered, "I'm just going to peek." And I carefully lifted just one corner of the curtain. Outside was pitch black. I cracked the window open just a tiny bit, and a freezing blast of air hit my face. I listened hard, trying to pinpoint where the voice was coming from. Suddenly, we heard loud, fast footsteps in the snow crunching rapidly towards the window. I slammed the window shut and locked it instantly. Whoever was out there had definitely seen me. Then a sharp knock on the glass confirmed it. I looked over at Melissa. She was completely hidden under the blankets, and I could hear her softly crying. I whispered, "Just stay quiet and don't make a sound, don't respond." That seemed like our only option. The knocking didn't come again, and there were no more calls, but we were wide awake, hearts pounding for what felt like hours, too scared to move. Exhaustion finally took over, and we fell asleep. The next morning, the first thing I did was look outside. Our worst fears were confirmed. Footprints, lots of them. They completely encircled the house, going right up to every window. Someone, maybe more than one person, had been walking around the house in the night, peering in. That was it for us. We decided to pack up and leave immediately. Clearly, someone had been watching us from almost the moment we arrived. I carefully locked everything away in the barn again. Then we packed the car in record time and headed straight back to Rhode Island. For those wondering, nothing was broken, nothing was stolen, and everything was fine the next time any of my family went back up. Honestly, I still have no idea what that person or those people wanted, but it was definitely the same presence we felt from the start. It might have been multiple individuals. When you're in such an isolated spot like that, realizing you're not alone, especially when that presence feels threatening, is the most unsettling feeling imaginable.
My wife Cheryl and I have been together for a decade. We tied the knot 2 years ago and just recently moved into our new home, a cozy place in a quiet town in Georgia, not far from a small patch of woods. I won't say exactly where, just in case. We were excited, hopeful, and ready to start a new chapter. We had plans, maybe adopt a dog and eventually raise kids. We wanted space, and this place had it. A wide yard, fresh air, and silence. At least that's what we thought. We both have regular jobs. I usually get home around 5 p.m., she follows about an hour later. The first weekend in the house was just unpacking boxes and dreaming about what we'd do with each room. Everything felt normal, peaceful, but that changed fast. It was Monday night. We'd just turned off the lights maybe 20 minutes before when music started playing. Not from a neighbor's house. No, this was much closer, and it was coming from our own backyard. Not party music or modern tracks, but it sounded like something from another time. Old, crackly, almost like it was playing from a record. We gave each other a weird look. Then I opened the bedroom window to hear better. The sound got clearer, like it was being projected just outside. After a quick search online, I figured out it was a song called Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, an old tune from the 1940s. It It wasn't scary by nature, but hearing it suddenly in the dark coming from the yard made it feel chilling. I figured maybe there was a light switch for the yard downstairs. Then I rushed to the back door, flipped a few switches, and the backyard lit up. But nobody was there, just still grass and trees. The music was louder with the door open, and I stepped out to try to find the source. That's when I realized it wasn't in the yard, it was coming from deeper in the woods. The song played all the way through, then silence. I told Cheryl it was probably some local kids messing with the new couple in town, but even as I said it, it sounded silly. Who does that? The next night, we hoped it was over, and we were wrong again. Just after turning off the lights, music blasted from outside, even louder this time. The song Tiptoe Through the Tulips. You've probably heard it, but in this moment, it wasn't funny or nostalgic, it was disturbing. I looked out the window, and this time I saw something in the yard. Not a person, but an object. I told Cheryl I was going to check it out. She was nervous, said maybe we should call someone. I told her I'd be quick. I stepped outside, trying to hold on to some confidence. I didn't want to seem scared, not to Cheryl, not to whoever might have thought this was a game. I reached the object, and it was smaller than it looked from the window. An old, rusty radio playing that creepy tune on full volume. I picked it up and held it over my head so Cheryl could see it from the window, but she didn't smile or nod. She started yelling my name, loud, repeatedly, telling me to run. Her voice was panicked, and I yelled back, "Why?" Then she screamed, "There are people behind you!" I froze, my heart pounding. I turned around slowly. 3 people were standing at the edge of the woods, not moving, just standing, watching me. And they were spaced apart, each facing directly toward me, not approaching, not running, just standing in complete silence. I didn't wait to see what they'd do next, and I bolted back into the house and slammed the door behind me. Cheryl was already in tears. I grabbed my phone and called the police. Thankfully, they arrived within minutes. Then we explained everything. The music, the figures, the radio. I handed them the device and made sure to only touch the handle. They said they'd take it and look into it. They walked toward the woods with flashlights, probably more to scare anyone still out there than to actually find something. Once they left, we were still shaken. And we didn't sleep much that night or the next. It's only been a few weeks since then. Nothing has happened since, and we hope it stays that way. But if it does come back, I'll be ready to film it, just in case. This story doesn't end here.
I grew up in a quiet rural part of Michigan. It was the kind of place where the roads were long, the trees never ended, and silence was the main soundtrack. If you liked being alone with nature, you'd love it. But for me, it always felt too far from life. As soon as I had a car and a little money, I left for somewhere closer to the city. My parents eventually sold the old house about 5 years ago, but I still remember every part of it clearly. The property was 3 acres wide, with a large house and a separate storage building out back. It was a peaceful place, most of the time. This story happened when I was 13. My parents often left me alone on weekends. I was responsible, they trusted me, and I had chores to do around the property. One Saturday, I was in the living room playing Vice City on my PS2. It was just me, the game, and a calm afternoon, until a sudden, loud, metallic bang echoed from somewhere outside. Startled, I paused the game and ran to check every window. Most of the yard looked empty, but when I reached the one facing the storage shed, I noticed something strange. The heavy door, normally shut tight, was wide open. My heart dropped. That door didn't just open on its own. I hurried to the closet, grabbed the old hunting rifle we kept for safety, and stepped outside. As I got closer, I shouted loudly, announcing myself. I wanted whoever might be in there to know I wasn't unarmed. I opened the door slowly, letting my voice carry inside. No answer. The storage building was packed with stuff. A riding mower, a quad bike, piles of tools and gardening gear. Someone could easily hide in there. I stood frozen for a moment, unsettled by the idea. Then I closed the door quickly and walked back to the house, locking it behind me. I sat at the window, staring out, watching that door, expecting it to swing open again. It never did, but I knew deep down it hadn't opened by accident. I tried calling my dad, no answer. This was back before texting was a thing, so I left him a voicemail.
Then I went back to my spot by the window, this time turning on the TV to help break the tension. Then I heard something, creaks from upstairs. I froze. My heart was pounding now. I didn't know if I was imagining things or if someone was really up there. I'd always been protective of our home, even if I didn't love that place. I felt like it was my duty to defend it. So I grabbed the rifle again and climbed the stairs silently. I didn't call out. I didn't want anyone to know I was coming. The hallway upstairs had 5 doors, 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, all closed. There was just enough space under the doors to see a bit of light or movement. I crouched and peeked under the door to my parents' room. That's when I saw them, 2 bare feet facing away from the door. I froze. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a game. Someone was really inside the house. I couldn't go through with it. I wasn't ready to confront a person. Then I quietly stepped away and hurried back downstairs, locking myself in the bathroom. I tried calling my dad again, still no answer. I left another voicemail. And then finally, I did what I should have done earlier. I called 911. I whispered everything to the operator, trying to stay calm. She told me to stay hidden and not make a sound. But then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Then they stopped right outside the bathroom door. There was silence, and then a voice, deep, casual. "What's up, kid?" I'll never forget that voice. If I heard it again today, I'd recognize it instantly. I panicked and broke the rule. I spoke loud and clear, and I said, "I'm on the phone with the police, and I'm not alone." I put the call on speaker. The operator was asking if I was okay. Suddenly, I heard the doorknob move. It rattled, but the door was locked. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps again, this time moving away. Then a door slammed somewhere in the house. Silence followed. I waited, barely breathing, until the police arrived. When they did, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Then they searched the entire house and yard. The person was gone. They asked if I had somewhere safe to stay that night, and I told them about my uncle. We called him, and he came right over. After talking with the officers, he took me to his place. What still haunts me today is knowing it was probably my fault. I had forgotten to lock the back door when I went outside to check the shed. That's likely when he entered. Even holding a rifle, I didn't feel safe. That day changed how I see everything.
I was heading home late one night after a long shift at work. It was just after midnight, the streets were nearly empty, and everything felt calm. I live in a small, quiet town where things rarely happen. The area has a lot of trees, open fields, and not many houses. The road I usually take has a big cornfield on one side and a dense patch of woods on the other. It was a warm summer night, around 75 degrees, and since I drive a convertible, I had the top down, enjoying the breeze. I was cruising along at about 50 miles an hour when, suddenly, a sound cut through the silence. A loud scream. It was a woman's voice, and it sounded terrified. I immediately hit the brakes and stopped in the middle of the road. Then I listened carefully, trying to figure out where it came from. A few seconds later, I heard it again. It was coming from the left side, deep inside the woods. The woman was shouting for help. Then, I didn't think twice. I grabbed the small baton I keep in my back seat just in case and stepped into the trees. I called out, "Who's there?" And almost instantly she responded, "Please, help me!" I pushed deeper into the forest, brushing past tree branches and tall bushes. I yelled for her to keep calling out so I could follow her voice. Every 10 seconds or so, she would shout, and I would run toward the sound. But something wasn't right. No matter how far I went, her voice never seemed to get closer. It stayed the same distance, same tone, like it was stuck in place. I was running hard trying to reach her, but nothing changed. I finally stopped and stood still, breathing heavily. Something felt very wrong. Then I called out,
"Tell me where you are," and waited. A few seconds later, I heard another "Help!" That was the moment I realized I might be walking into something I didn't understand, because it didn't feel like a normal situation anymore. The voice hadn't moved the whole time. It was exactly the same. I turned around and started sprinting back toward the road. I didn't stop until I could see my car headlights shining through the trees. But even as I ran back, the woman's cries didn't fade. They were still there, still the same distance away, almost like the sound was following me. I jumped in my car, slammed the door, and took off down the road, heart racing. I didn't know what I had just experienced, but I knew I wanted to be far away from it. Once I was safe at home, I called the local authorities to report what I heard. I figured maybe they'd want to check the area just in case. I didn't stick around, and I didn't really want to think about it too much after that. Over the next few days, I told a few close friends and family members about what happened. Everyone thought it was strange, but life went on. That was until a week later when I saw something on the local news. A man hiking with his dog had found the body of a woman in the woods. She was in her 30s, and according to the report, there were no obvious signs of what happened to her. They showed the location where she was found, and it was in the same area where I heard those screams. The forest there is pretty big, so maybe it was just a strange coincidence. But something deep inside me tells me it wasn't.
Back before Jenny and I became an official couple, we already spent a lot of time together. One thing we both loved was snowboarding, and her family owned a small, cozy cabin in Vermont, not too far from a mountain resort. It was maybe the 10th time we were hanging out when she invited me to join her for a weekend at the cabin. We'd finally get to snowboard together for the first time. The trip was about 5 hours long, and the last part of the drive took us along a narrow, winding road that felt completely hidden from the rest of the world. As we drove deeper into the mountains, it was like entering a quiet, frozen world. Most of the driveways we passed were untouched by tire tracks, covered in snow, and surrounded by dense trees. Jenny mentioned that most of the homes in the area were owned by out-of-state folks who only visited occasionally, just like her family. I was cruising at around 30 miles an hour when she suddenly told me to slow down, and it was easy to miss the entrance to her place. Sure enough, just past some trees, a small path appeared that I turned and followed the snowy trail with the four-wheel drive on. After a short drive, we reached a small house blanketed in snow, and it looked like something out of a winter postcard. As soon as we parked, the first thing we did was turn on the heat. We brought our stuff inside and decided to stay in for the night because it was already getting dark, so we made dinner from the food we brought and watched a movie. The Pursuit of Happiness, actually. The house had electricity and heating, but there was no running water. Instead, her family kept large containers of water for things like washing hands and dishes. The only thing missing was a working bathroom, so we had to use an outhouse outside. That night I only needed to pee, so I just went out on the front deck and aimed for the snow. It was snowing lightly, and everything was peaceful. After we fell asleep sometime during the second movie and woke up early to our alarms, excited to hit the slopes. While getting ready, I had to use the outhouse properly this time. I ran outside with just my shoes on, and my feet started freezing instantly. On my way there, I noticed something odd: footprints in the snow. They were big, but I couldn't tell if they were made by boots or some kind of animal. I followed the prints and saw they went around the house and into the woods. I called Jenny outside, and she looked at them too. She figured they were probably from a black bear since they're common in the area. I finished up, and we headed out for a full day of snowboarding, which was amazing. Afterwards, we stopped at a small diner for food and returned to the cabin just as the sun disappeared. It was snowing again, and the night felt heavier somehow. We made a fire, turned the heat up, and played some music. Eventually, we started drinking and having fun. At one point, nature called again, and I decided to head to the outhouse. Since I had to bundle up anyway, I figured I might as well take care of everything at once. The snowstorm was stronger this time, so I quickly ran outside. When I closed the outhouse door, I still heard the music from inside, but then something strange happened. Over the music,
I heard the sound of footsteps outside, crunching through the snow. I called out, "Jenny," but got no reply, and the steps faded away. My phone was on me, and I sent her a quick text asking if she was outside, but the message didn't deliver immediately. Reception was terrible up here. Minutes passed while I stayed inside the outhouse, but then everything went quiet. The music had stopped completely, and I stepped outside and noticed the house was completely dark, no lights at all. I thought the power had gone out. I turned on my phone flashlight and saw something chilling. Fresh footprints in the snow, leading right up to the house, then around it. I followed the tracks and started banging on the front door, yelling for Jenny. Suddenly the door opened, and Jenny pulled me inside in a panic. She locked the door quickly and whispered what had just happened. She told me that not long after I went outside, someone came up to the door and tried to get in. Thinking it was me, she had already locked it, but when she saw through the window that it wasn't me, she quickly turned off all the lights and hid in the corner of the living room. She watched silently as a stranger slowly walked past the window, looking in. Shaken, I remembered Jenny had mentioned a hidden cellar in the floor where her dad kept a few hunting tools for safety. I used my flashlight to find the handle and pulled it open. I climbed down, found what we needed, and came back up. We sat on the couch in the dark, trying not to make a sound, and hoping whoever it was had gone. The nearest neighbors weren't close, and Jenny said she didn't think any of them were even in Vermont at the time. We waited, barely moving, until that chilling sound returned. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the snow circling the cabin again. This time, I stood up, opened the front door, and sent out a loud warning into the night. I didn't see anyone, but the footsteps stopped. Whether the person ran off or just froze in place, we couldn't tell. The only sound left was the snow falling quietly. The next morning, we packed up early and left, just like her father advised over the phone, and he said it was better not to be there for a while. We never found out who it was or what they wanted. But one thing's for sure, after that night, the mountain didn't feel so peaceful anymore.
My name is Howard, and I'm 25. I live on a small family farm right in the middle of Arkansas. It's not a big commercial place or anything, just a peaceful bit of land we've had for years. My parents own it, and whenever they travel, I take care of it. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, 2 younger sisters, Crystal and Morgan, and since I'm the only guy, my parents think I'll eventually take over the farm. But honestly, that's not really my dream. I've always imagined something different for my life, because I didn't want to spend my entire future surrounded by fields and cows. And what happened last July gave me even more reason to think about leaving. My parents went on a little romantic vacation, just for a week. That left me and my 2 sisters in charge of the property. Crystal was busy with her college summer courses, always on her laptop in her room. Morgan and I were chilling in the living room, watching some silly show on TV. It was just another quiet night until it wasn't. Living in the countryside means a lot of space and not many neighbors. Sounds peaceful, right? But it also means weird things sometimes happen. That night, right before we were about to head to bed, our 2 dogs outside suddenly started barking like crazy. I mean, they never bark like that unless something really spooks them. I stepped out onto the back porch trying to calm them down. They were both staring straight toward the crops. I didn't see anything at first, but then I heard something. It was whistling, a clear, slow whistle, coming from somewhere inside the cornfield. It wasn't a bird or the wind, it was a person. I froze for a second because I'd never had to deal with someone sneaking onto the property before. My first instinct was to grab one of the old rifles we keep in the house for emergencies. I told my sisters what I heard and that I was thinking of going into the cornfield to check, but they both freaked out and begged me not to. They said it was too risky to go running into a dark field after someone we couldn't even see. And honestly, they were right. I mean, it's not like I'm a superhero or something. Instead, I stepped back outside with the dogs and fired a warning shot into the air, just loud enough to scare off anyone hiding out there. I also shouted something like, "Get off our land." Not very original, but it felt powerful in the moment. My sisters laughed nervously, and I laughed too.
For a second, it felt like everything was okay again. But it wasn't. Just a couple of minutes later, the dogs went wild again, even louder this time. I ran outside and stopped cold when I saw him. A person standing just a few meters away, right at the edge of the cornfield, just staring. I yelled out, "Hey!" and he immediately turned and ran back into the field, and I fired another warning shot, not at him, just up into the sky again. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, just to scare them away. I hurried over to the dogs, unclipped their chains, and brought them inside. My sisters were both shaken up, so I gave each of them one dog to sleep with, and I kept the rifle in my room. We tried to go back to normal, but there was still tension in the air. I left my window open a little while, watching a movie on my laptop, just trying to distract myself. Then I heard it again. That whistle. It was outside my window this time. I got up quickly and peeked out. There was someone walking slowly through the grass, still whistling like they were in a movie or something. And then they stopped, like they knew I was watching. The person turned their head and looked right at my window, like he saw me through the darkness. I didn't wait. I grabbed the rifle again, aimed down at the grass near his feet, and fired. Still just a warning. I wasn't trying to hit anyone, just to end this creepy little show he was putting on. He ran off immediately, this time toward the front of the house. And that was it. He never came back. We never figured out who it was or why they were doing it. Maybe it was a teenager pulling some weird prank. Maybe it was someone who really wanted to scare us. Whatever the reason, we didn't hear or see anything else for the rest of the night. But I still remember the sound of that whistle, and the way he looked right at me, like he knew exactly where I was. Since then, I've been thinking even more about leaving the farm life behind. Sometimes quiet places can hold the creepiest secrets.
I was just 18 when my parents left for a week-long trip to celebrate their anniversary. My sister had already moved out, so I had the whole house to myself. Their property was tucked away in a quiet wooded area with a long dirt driveway that connected to a back road. Each house along the road was spaced far apart, which made the area feel pretty isolated. Everyone in our small town kind of knew each other. You'd see familiar faces all the time, whether at the grocery store, gas station, or even local events. That day, while my parents were away, I stopped by a gas station to fill up my car. As I was pumping gas, a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up beside me. A man with a short beard stepped out, greeted me kindly, and began filling his tank. He seemed friendly, and it wasn't unusual for strangers to chat in our town, but something felt a bit off. After locking his pump, he walked around to my side and asked, "Hey, do you know how to get to the interstate from here?" I gave him directions as best I could. Strangely, he pulled out a small notepad and wrote them down. I thought it was weird he didn't just use a phone like most people. He asked if I was from around there, and I said, yeah, I'd lived there my whole life. He said he was just passing through, but didn't mention where he was from. Then, just before leaving, he asked my name. I hesitated, but told him, "Kate." He smiled and said, "That's a beautiful name," before getting in his car. I left first and turned onto the road heading home. A few minutes later, I turned into our driveway and noticed the same black Jeep behind me. But instead of turning in, he kept driving and passed by quickly, and he didn't even slow down. It was strange because he went in the complete opposite direction of where I told him the interstate was. Trying not to overthink it, I went inside and carried on with my evening. Later that night, I was heading out to meet some friends. As I walked to my car, I thought I heard footsteps in the woods. It could have been an animal because this was summer and we were surrounded by nature. I didn't look too hard, just got in the car and left. But when I came back home later that night, things took a turn. As I walked from the car to the front door, I suddenly heard a voice coming from the woods, a man's voice, and he said my name, Kate. I froze and every hair on my body stood up. I looked around, heart racing, then rushed inside and locked the door behind me. I sat on the couch, trying to calm down. Sure, neighbors knew me by name, but no one lived close enough to just randomly yell out like that, especially not without saying who they were. I called my parents, and they told me it was probably someone nearby playing a joke or just calling out for something else. I didn't mention the gas station guy. The next day was quiet. I stayed home for most of it. That night, I got ready again to go out, but when I stepped outside, I heard it again. Someone calling my name. This time it was louder and closer.
I didn't wait, and I ran back inside, locked the door, and called the police. 2 officers showed up and checked around the house with flashlights. They didn't find anyone, but told me to call back if it happened again. I didn't feel much better. It's not like they caught anyone. The house felt less like home and more like a target. The next day, I had to work a late shift. I left during the day and thankfully didn't hear anything unusual. Maybe whoever it was had been scared off by the cops. After a long night at work, I was ready to crash. Then I got home, parked my car, and was walking to the door when I heard it again. Footsteps. Not light ones like an animal, but heavy, deliberate ones. I paused on the porch, listening. Then the voice came back. It said, "Kate, don't call the cops on me again, cutie." I shouted back, "You need help!" and slammed the door shut behind me. I called the police again. They returned, did another search, and suggested I stay elsewhere for the night. My parents wouldn't be back until the next evening, and I agreed it was safer to leave. My friend Alex said I could stay with her. Then I packed a bag and checked every window before heading outside. I locked the door and ran to my car, but as I turned the key in the ignition, I heard a sound right next to my door. There was a man standing outside the driver's side. He wore a mask and was trying to open the door, and my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't even scream. He started hitting the window with his elbow. I threw the car into gear and sped across the yard, down the driveway, and didn't stop until I got to Alex's house. I was shaking, crying, and trying to explain everything on the phone to Alex and her dad. He said he would have picked me up if he'd known. We called the police together, and they sent officers back to my parents' house. They checked everything again, and one officer even came to Alex's to take another statement. Apparently, this was the most excitement the local police had seen in years. Thankfully, my parents returned the next day, and I finally felt safe again. But I'm sure that man at the gas station followed me home. He probably realized I was alone and decided to take advantage of the situation. Looking back, I should have never given him my real name, and I should have noticed he was behind me that day. Some people out there just aren't right. This whole experience pushed me to move into my own apartment shortly after. And ever since, I've been a little more careful, a little more watchful. You never know who's watching you when you're not paying attention.
A few years back, probably around 8 or so, I had one of the strangest nights of my life. Back then, I was 19, and I spent most of my time with 2 close friends, Sean and James. We were the kind of people who looked for ways to break boredom, even if it meant doing things we probably shouldn't have. James and I eventually drifted apart, but Sean and I still talk to this day, and somehow this story always comes up. We lived in a small town in New Jersey. It wasn't fancy, just a bunch of empty houses, old roads, and forgotten places. There was one spot in particular that had everyone's attention: an abandoned church at the top of a steep hill. Everyone in the area knew about it, and the road that led to it was blocked off. The building looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and the whole place gave off a weird feeling, even in broad daylight. One chilly night in October, we decided to do something stupid in the name of spooky season. Sean had an old Ouija board tucked away in his closet, and someone got the brilliant idea to bring it to the church. I was the one driving, so I picked up James first, then Sean, and we made our way toward that forgotten hill. The road to the church was closed, so we left the car nearby and walked the rest of the way in near silence. We didn't want to attract attention, so we only used one flashlight on the way up. Once we reached the top, though, we all turned our lights on. The church was surrounded by woods, and a gravel lot sat on one side like a ghost of what used to be there. The main door was already cracked open, maybe from years of people sneaking in. It took 2 of us to push it open all the way, and it scraped loudly across the floor. Once inside, we pointed our flashlights around to make sure we were alone. The place was a mess, graffiti on every wall, broken benches, the usual stuff you find in a place that's been forgotten. Sean set up the board near the center of the main room. He also pulled out 3 candles from his bag and arranged them in a triangle around the board. Once they were lit, we turned off our flashlights. Now, the only light came from those flickering flames, and the whole mood shifted. We could barely see a few feet in any direction, and it felt like the room had shrunk around us. We started the session, Sean did most of the talking, asking the usual questions like, "Is anyone here?" and "Can you hear us?" The planchette, the little piece you move around the board, began to slide slowly. We all laughed. I was sure one of them was doing it. I mean, that's how it always goes, right? Still, we went along with it. A few words were spelled out and we joked around, but then something strange happened. From near the altar came a loud crack, like something heavy, like wood splitting in half. We jumped. Our flashlights shot toward the noise, but we didn't see anything unusual. The place was old, falling apart, so maybe it wasn't that strange? Still, the mood shifted. We kept going, taking turns asking questions, but the board had gone still. None of us were laughing anymore. Then came another sound from the same area, near the altar. Before we could even shine our lights, something landed right on the board. All of us jumped and shouted. It was a rock, about the size of a golf ball, and it came out of nowhere. Just seconds earlier, all our hands were on the planchette. There was no way one of us did that. We bolted. No discussion, no hesitation. We left the board and candles behind and ran all the way down the hill to the car. We didn't stop to look back until we jumped in and sat there for a long time, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what just happened. Sean, being the most spiritual among us, was convinced we had connected with something. Me, I wasn't sure. And I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe people can hide in places like that. And the idea that someone might have been there watching us, that scared me more. The next day, Sean and James went back to grab the board, but when they got to the entrance, it was gone. The candles were still there, placed exactly where we had left them, but the board had vanished. They didn't go inside, and they just turned around and left. That night remains the most unsettling experience of my life. And even now, whenever Sean and I talk, we both admit we don't really want to know what happened up there.
I was around 15 or 16 when I had to spend a night alone at home. My parents were away, and for the life of me, I can't remember why. All I knew was that I had the house to myself, and that meant one thing: gaming. At that time, I was addicted to StarCraft. I could spend entire weekends locked into online battles, barely moving from my chair. That night wasn't any different. I had my headset on, my room lights on, and the rest of the house was dark. It was just before the global lockdown started, and everything still felt somewhat normal. That's when I heard the doorbell ring twice. I paused my game and rushed to the door, not wanting to lose progress. I called out, "Who is it?" like I always did when I was home alone. A soft, muffled voice responded. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like a woman. Then I peeked through the window and saw an older woman with a huge smile on her face, standing behind the storm door, and her hands were behind her back. I asked if I could help her, and she said she needed to use a phone and asked if she could come inside. I remembered what my parents always told me: never let a stranger into the house. That rule had no exceptions, even if it was an elderly lady. Feeling a bit awkward, I told her about a library a few blocks away that might have a phone. Deep down, I knew it was already closed, but I didn't know what else to say. Her smile didn't fade, but her tone changed. "That's rude," she said. "I'm just an old lady asking for help." I nervously explained that my parents didn't allow visitors when they're not home. As I slowly closed the door, she just stood there, smiling in the same exact way, but now it felt different, less kind, and more off. I walked back to my room and sat down, trying to focus on my game, but then the doorbell rang again. There was no way I was going back. Something felt wrong about her. I told myself maybe she was confused, maybe she wasn't fully aware of where she was, but I still wasn't taking any risks. A few minutes later, while I was still trying to game, I heard a tapping sound on my window, a light metallic clink, like something hard tapping against the glass. My window faced the front yard, and it was the only one with the lights on. I pulled down the blinds earlier so I couldn't see what was outside, but I had a pretty good guess. It chilled me. Could it be the same woman? Was she now outside my window? I muted my game. At this point, I didn't care if I lost. The tapping continued. I left my room and sat quietly in the dark living room. A few minutes passed, then the doorbell rang again, and she was still out there. I tried convincing myself that she wasn't dangerous, just confused. But then the doorbell rang again and again. I finally decided to go see what she wanted one last time. When I opened the door, someone else was standing there, a man. He looked much younger than the woman, maybe in his 30s or 40s. He had a serious expression. He asked if I had seen his mother. I told him yes, she came by earlier. Then he nodded and apologized, saying she sometimes wandered off and seemed disoriented. He asked if he could come in for a second. That made me feel uncomfortable. Why did he need to come in? I politely said we could talk through the door, and I also mentioned I heard something near my window earlier and that maybe she walked around the house. I said he could check the backyard. He thanked me and walked off, supposedly heading around back. But when I peeked through the back window, no one was there, neither him nor the woman. The backyard was completely empty. I felt a wave of unease. Nothing about this felt right. That night, I went to bed early, trying to forget the whole thing, and I left the TV on, just for comfort. But not long after lying down, because I heard it again. That tapping on the window. I knew that sound. It was metal. It was back. I gathered the courage to peek through the blinds. And there she was, the same woman, same eerie smile, standing outside my window, tapping on the glass with a kitchen knife. I froze. Then quietly, I let the blind fall back into place and crawled back into bed, staying as still as possible. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang again, multiple times, 4 or 5 times in a row. The tapping had stopped. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just waited it out. Eventually, the sound stopped. Then I fell asleep, somehow. The next morning, I called my dad. He told me I did the right thing, and everyone I talked to said it sounded like something suspicious, like someone trying to lure me into opening the door. Maybe it was a confused woman and her son, but if so, why the strange behavior? Why the tapping? Why the request to come inside? Too many questions and too many chills. But that wasn't the end of it. Just a week ago, something happened that brought all those memories back. A friend of mine, Cody, asked me to watch his dog Theo overnight. Theo is a little Pomsky, adorable but noisy. He barked at every little sound. That night, he suddenly went nuts and barking at the back door. I figured he wanted to go out, so I headed over to let him out. But just as I was about to open the door, I noticed the handle turning from the outside. Someone was trying to open it. I looked through the screen door and saw a man staring back at me. I didn't recognize him at all. He looked about in his mid-50s, unkempt, and not someone I'd expect to know Cody or his family. He asked if I'd seen someone named Melissa, and I told him there was no one by that name here and that he needed to leave. I also mentioned there were cameras around the house. Then he left, right away without protest. Later, I asked Cody about it, and he asked his sister Melissa. She said she had no idea who the guy was. He didn't seem like someone she'd know. The fact that he tried to open the back door without knocking first made my skin crawl. You can only imagine what might have happened if I hadn't seen him in time. And all of it reminded me, again, lock your doors, always.
When I was 19, I used to work part-time at a small local pizza shop. The job was simple. Take the order, pack the food, and deliver it to the customer. I'd done it hundreds of times. Nothing strange ever happened because it was just routine. Most people tip between $3 to $5. Occasionally, someone generous would leave 10 or more. One evening, I got an order for a chicken sandwich and a slice of pizza. Small order, which usually meant a small tip. But I didn't have a say. I just took whatever came my way. The delivery address was on a dead-end road. This part of town felt more isolated than the rest. There were small houses with big yards.
one with an RV on the lawn and some woods nearby. The house I was delivering to sat next to what looked like an abandoned home, overgrown with weeds and bushes. It was about 6 p.m., just starting to get dark. People were turning on their lights, but this house had none, and the front door was slightly open. As I approached, I heard someone playing piano inside. It sounded faint, like it was coming from another room. I knocked, then rang the doorbell. It didn't work. Still, the piano kept playing. But I didn't want to just walk in, so I headed around back to try another entrance. The backyard was a mess. Random junk was scattered across the grass, and I even saw a rusty old fence lying on its side. I knocked loudly on the back door and peeked through the glass, and the inside was dark and cluttered, like a storage room. No one came to the door, so I walked back to the front and called the shop to double-check the address. My coworker confirmed I was in the right place. I pushed the front door open and stepped in. That same piano tune was playing, slow and eerie, repeating over and over. Then I called out, "Pizza's here." The music stopped and a voice called out, "Over here." The piano started up again. It was strange. No lights, just that music playing in the dark. I walked toward the sound. The air inside smelled musty, like no one had cleaned the place in years. I stopped halfway in, suddenly feeling very uneasy. I called out again, "I'm by the door, sir." The piano stopped now. It was completely quiet. A voice answered, "Yes, sorry, I have trouble walking. Could you bring it in here, please?" I asked, "Which room are you in?" There was a pause, then he said, "Just walk through the living room. I'm in the dining room." That made me pause, because nothing in the order notes said anything about bringing the food inside. It was starting to feel very wrong. I thought, maybe it's just an old man who lives alone and needs help. I didn't want to assume the worst. Still, being cautious, I peeked around the corner of the next room before walking in. I could see the piano, but no one was sitting at it. The entire room was empty. That was enough for me. I turned around, quietly walked out the door, and drove straight back to the shop. I told my manager what happened, and he was surprisingly understanding, especially since no one called asking about the missing food. That silence said everything. Later that night, I looked up the address online. Turns out, that house had been empty for months, and it was listed as foreclosed, totally vacant. Everyone at work was shocked. I realized I had probably come way too close to something bad, or maybe someone just wanted to play a twisted prank. Either way, I never took another delivery to that side of town again.
My wife Carol and I have twin boys, Sam and Robbie. They're both 6 years old now. About a year ago, we lived in a different house, a place we called home for about 4 years. Carol and I got married while I was there, and it's where we brought Sam and Robbie home from the hospital. Honestly, we loved that house and planned to stay for a long, long time. The neighborhood around us was changing a bit, maybe not always for the better, but it was still our home. That is, until something happened that made us leave much sooner than we ever expected. Our house was on the corner. The house directly behind us, on the other street, was pretty much hidden by a thick wall of tall trees and bushes. We hardly ever saw those neighbors. Our neighbor on the right side, though, was different. His name was Steve, and he'd moved in less than a year before everything started. I'd only talked to him a couple of times. Both times, his accent was so thick, it was hard to understand him, and honestly, he didn't seem like the friendliest person. He had 2 windows upstairs that looked right down into our backyard. Not much privacy, but we didn't think much of it. I never saw lights on in those rooms, ever. I always figured it was just an empty guest room or storage space. One hot summer day, the boys were playing in the backyard. They had their little blow-up pool out and were having a blast with their water guns. I was outside too, doing some yard work. At one point, I was walking towards our detached garage when I happened to glance over. For just a split second, I saw Steve at one of those upstairs windows looking down. Almost as soon as I noticed him, he turned and moved away from the window. And it was a little strange, sure, but I tried to brush it off. Later that same day, as the sun was starting to set, the boys went back outside to cool off in the pool again. Carol and I were inside in the kitchen, and she was getting dinner ready. Suddenly, the sound of the boys laughing stopped. It got quiet. Then Robbie came running inside, looking a bit worried. He said, "Dad, there was a flashing light from the neighbor's window." I followed him back into the yard to see what he meant. He pointed straight up at one of Steve's upstairs windows, the same one I'd seen him at earlier. Robbie insisted, "There was a bright white light that kept coming from that window." My heart sank. The first thing that popped into my head wasn't good. I asked both boys, trying to stay calm, "Did it look like a camera flash?" They both nodded and said yes. I told them playtime was over for the day. "Okay, guys, time to dry off and come inside," I said. I helped them get dry and brought them in. Then I immediately went to tell Carol, and she had the same reaction I did. She was really concerned and suggested I go next door right then and talk to Steve. So I went over and knocked on Steve's door. I knocked several times and rang the doorbell. His car was parked right there in the driveway, so he had to be home, but he never came to the door. After trying for a few minutes, I gave up and went back home. I told Carol he wouldn't answer, and that made the whole thing with the flashing light seem even more suspicious to both of us. We couldn't prove that the light was a camera, but it sure sounded like it, and that was incredibly unsettling. Some time passed after that, maybe a few weeks. Then one night, Carol and I were in our bedroom getting ready for bed. We both clearly heard the latch on our side gate click open, and then click shut again. Someone was in our backyard. Then Carol whispered, "James, go check." I grabbed a flashlight and stepped cautiously into the backyard. I turned on all the outdoor lights and searched carefully around the patio and the grass. I didn't find anyone. But then I noticed the lights were on in Steve's backyard. I walked closer to the fence separating our yards to see if I could spot anything over there. I nearly jumped out of my skin when Steve suddenly appeared right on the other side of the fence. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice flat. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Hey Steve, just checking around. Did you see or hear anyone come through our yard just now? Sounded like the gate opened." He just stared at me and said, "No." Since he was there, I decided to be direct. Then I added, "Listen, Steve, my kids mentioned seeing a bright flashing light coming from your upstairs window a while back when they were playing outside. They thought maybe someone was taking pictures. Any idea what that might have been?" His reaction was intense, and he got instantly defensive, almost shouting, "What? Are you accusing me of something? That's crazy." He seemed way more offended than someone just answering a simple question should be. Without any proof, I didn't want a big fight. Then I just said, okay, sorry to bother you," and went back inside. Carol was furious, and she didn't believe his reaction at all. The final incident happened a few more weeks later. In the middle of the night, we were fast asleep when Carol shook me awake urgently. "James, wake up," she whispered, panicked. I was disoriented at first, but then I heard it. Robbie was screaming from the kids' room downstairs. My heart raced. I jumped out of bed and ran downstairs as fast as I could. Robbie was sitting up in his bed, crying hysterically, and his screaming had woken up Sam, who was also crying now, scared by his brother's fear. Trying to calm Robbie down, and I asked what happened. He choked out, "There was a flashing light from the neighbor's window." A chill ran down my spine, and a wave of anger started to build. All I could manage to ask was, "What did they look like?" He just shook his head. "I didn't see, Dad. It was dark." I gathered both boys up and brought them upstairs to sleep in our bed with Carol. Once they were settled, I turned off our bedroom light and carefully peeked out our window toward Steve's dark house. I scanned each window, and then I saw him. There he was, Steve, just like me, peeking out from the darkness of that same upstairs window that looked right into our backyard. And he was watching us. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed outside and marched straight to Steve's front door, and I rang the doorbell over and over, probably 15 times. Leaning on it, nothing, and he wouldn't open the door. The next day I called the local police station, not for an emergency, but to file a report about Steve's suspicious behavior, the flashing lights, the gate, and him watching us at night. I explained my concerns, hoping that if anyone else reported something similar about him in the future, the police might take notice. After that night, I never actually saw Steve outside his house again. Sometimes I'd sit on my front porch hoping to catch him coming or going, but he clearly avoided being outside whenever I was there. The whole situation just felt too unsettling, too close to home, especially with the boys feeling scared. We decided we couldn't stay. Within a month, we packed up and moved to a new house in a different town nearby. It was a big change, But honestly, it's been a much better, calmer place for our family, especially for raising Sam and Robbie. We feel safer here.
About 3 months back, I moved into an apartment with my buddies Max and Chloe so I could start college in the city. Our building isn't perfect. Most rooms, like mine, face the hallway where everyone walks by, so privacy isn't great if the windows are open. But honestly, I'm usually on campus. Max and Chloe are cool and most neighbors are friendly, so it doesn't bug me much. A few nights ago, I was getting ready for bed when I started hearing music drifting in. Mostly old pop songs from the 2000s. Since we live in a student area near the lakes, full of parties, I figured it was just that, probably some folks having fun nearby. I hopped into bed and put on a random video to help me drift off, like I usually do. Just as I was getting sleepy, a new noise cut through. A loud, repetitive drilling sound. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was from my phone video. I paused it. Nope. Someone was definitely using a drill nearby. I got up, confused, and walked around our place. It was nearly 11 p.m., way too late for normal work. The sound was loudest by my bedroom window. Then I opened it to check and realized it was coming right next door from the apartment closest to my window. That's when I noticed the music was coming from there too. Weird. That apartment was supposed to be empty. Maybe someone was moving in soon and the landlord ordered some fixes. But doing it this late on a Thursday? Super strange. I tried to get back to sleep, but the drilling just wouldn't stop. I was texting a friend, venting about it, even sending voice notes and a quick video pointing towards the noisy window. He said I should call the authorities because this couldn't be allowed in a residential building. I decided against it. I just wanted sleep, and it was already past midnight. I somehow managed to doze off, but around 1 a.m., I woke up again. This time, it was hammering. I was stressed, but still didn't want to deal with it. Tried sleeping again, woke up again, and didn't even check the time. I was totally done. I threw on my robe and headed out to see who was making all the racket. Their window was open, above the stairs leading down to the street. I'd have to go down a few steps to see in properly, and I'd look even shorter looking up, but I didn't care. As soon as I reached the window and looked inside, most of my courage vanished. 4 guys, all looking maybe in their 30s or 40s, had stopped everything and were staring right at me. The only sound left was that pop song from the radio. The sudden silence after all that noise was actually chilling, even though I'd wanted the noise to stop moments before. Having all 4 men focused silently on me was the last thing I wanted. Another thing that felt off, though I didn't really process it until later, was their music choice. It just seemed creepy that guys that age were blasting music aimed at much younger people. They didn't look surprised, just confused, like, what's this? Remembering why I was there, I spoke up. "Excuse me, it's really late. Most people here have early mornings. Could you maybe do this another time?" Now, picture this. I'm James, 19, pretty short and not exactly imposing, standing there in just my robe. Then 2 of the older guys came right up to the window, looking way down at me. They looked me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. Both were sweaty, mouths slightly open, and one was holding a heavy-looking hammer. They started smiling in this really unsettling way. I suddenly felt sick to my stomach, and I started slowly backing up the steps towards my apartment, keeping my eyes locked on them, half expecting them to lunge. As soon as I reached the top step and was out of their line of sight, I bolted for my front door, got inside, and locked it tight. Chloe was away that night, and I figured Max was asleep since he hadn't seen my text in our group chat asking if anyone knew who was next door. Back in my room, it was quiet. No tools, no radio either. I wasn't sure how to feel. The anger was gone and replaced with just feeling totally grossed out and creeped. I knew I should have called someone right then, but I was too stressed to deal with anything else. It was about 2 a.m. I got back into bed, trying to convince myself I wasn't scared, just exhausted. I eventually fell asleep. I woke up again later around 3 a.m. This time it was completely silent from next door. Too silent. The quiet actually bothered me. It felt heavy, and I woke up feeling like something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe someone was right outside my closed window. I tried not to think about it, but peaceful sleep was impossible after that. The next morning, heading out, I passed that window, and it was closed now, like the whole weird night never happened. I asked Max if he had heard anything. He said he woke up a few times during the night, but couldn't move because of sleep paralysis. At least that confirmed I wasn't imagining things. Those guys were real. But the questions remained. How did they get keys to the building and that apartment? Why did it seem like they didn't want to be seen in daylight? And what exactly were they planning? It's been a week now, and thankfully I haven't seen those men again, but I still have no idea who they were or what they were really doing there. Honestly, the thought that they might come back or are still hanging around somewhere really scares me.
It was a long holiday weekend, so a few of us decided to escape the city and rent a house by a quiet lake. It was pretty far, around a 3-hour drive from where we lived, but the price was too good to pass up. The place was listed on a vacation rental site and had this huge wooden deck with a hot tub overlooking the water. There was even a fire pit near the edge of the lake, surrounded by those classic wooden chairs. It looked perfect for a weekend of laughs and music with friends. There were 6 of us: Jamie, Crystal, Rich, Adam, C, and me. We packed into Adam's truck and made the long drive. I had found the place online, and honestly, it looked like a hidden gem. The owner had left a message saying there was a hidden key behind the mailbox to unlock the gate. Once inside, a narrow gravel road led us through a bunch of trees and then opened up to the house on a small hill. The first thing I did was walk to the back deck to see the lake. It was honestly beautiful, calm water, birds flying by, and not a single sound of traffic or people. But we weren't there for peace and quiet, right? Right after unpacking, we cracked open drinks, lit the grill, and turned on the music. We played games, laughed way too loud, and partied like there were no neighbors. As far as we knew, there weren't any. The signal out there was terrible, but honestly, that made the weekend even better. No phones, just us and the moment. As the sun set, we gathered around the fire pit. That's when things started getting weird. Out of nowhere, a woman appeared, middle-aged, short hair, and a rough look about her. She was standing just where the trees started and began yelling at us to turn the music down. We lowered it, and she started ranting about how people from out of town always come here, mess things up, and make noise. She sounded bitter and angry. I tried to calm her down and said sorry for the noise. One of the girls asked if she lived nearby, and the woman didn't answer that, just shouted something about not being able to hear herself think. Then she turned and walked back into the woods, literally into the dark forest. As strange as that was, once she was gone, we laughed it off, but it did leave us feeling a little uneasy. Still, we kept the party going. After all, we were just trying to enjoy the night. Some time passed, maybe an hour, maybe 2, and the music paused for a moment. That's when we heard it, a voice, faint but clear, coming from the lake. Someone was calling for help. We turned off the speaker and listened. Again, a voice, "Help!" It sounded like someone was out there in the dark water, and I went to the edge and called out, "Are you okay?" A man's voice answered, saying he was stuck. There was a kayak leaning nearby, so Adam and I jumped in and started paddling. We kept yelling out to guide us, but every time the voice responded, it sounded like it was drifting farther and farther away. No matter how fast we rowed, we couldn't catch up to it. After 10 minutes, there was just silence. We were in the middle of a pitch-black lake, only the lights of the house visible behind us. Then suddenly, from back at the house, screams, loud, panicked screams, multiple voices, and definitely female. Adam and I didn't waste a second, and we turned the kayak around and paddled hard, adrenaline rushing. By the time we reached the shore and the screaming had stopped, we called out for our friends, but no one answered. The house was completely silent. When we checked inside, it was empty. Everyone was gone. No signs of a struggle, nothing broken, no mess. We tried calling them, but of course,
No signal. Adam's truck was still there, so we jumped in and drove around looking for help. Eventually, we found a narrow road leading to another house. The lights were on, so we ran up and rang the bell. No one answered. We knocked again, nothing. Curious and worried, we peeked through a window. Inside, standing completely still in the middle of the living room, was the same woman who had yelled at us earlier, just staring straight at the window. Her face was expressionless, almost blank. We shouted, asked if she had seen our friends, but she didn't move at all. It was so creepy that we just left. Right as we were getting back in the truck, my phone finally buzzed and Rich was calling. I picked up and asked where they were. He was out of breath, talking fast. He said 2 men wearing masks had come out of the woods holding something in their hands, and that's why the girl screamed. They all ran into the trees to hide. One of the girls had managed to call emergency services, and they were waiting near the road, too scared to come back. Suddenly, the call cut off. No signal again. We waited on the roadside not far from the cabin. After maybe 20 minutes, we saw flashing lights in the distance. Then the authorities had arrived. We waved them down and explained everything. Together, we drove slowly down the road until we spotted our friends running out from the woods, waving frantically. We picked them up and went back to the cabin with the police. Everyone was shaken, and they explained what happened again, how the men came out of nowhere, how they hid in the woods, and how scared they were. Oddly, the cabin hadn't been touched. No sign of a break-in, nothing stolen. The search team even looked into the lake, but found nothing. We didn't stick around for long after that. Later, we pushed hard to get a refund for the stay. We didn't get the full amount back, but enough. We still don't know what really happened. Was it all a setup? Was the voice in the lake connected to those masked men? Was that strange woman involved somehow? Were they trying to scare us off or something worse? We don't know, and we never want to know. One thing's for sure, none of us are booking lake cabins in the middle of nowhere ever again.
My very first major skiing adventure happened with my awesome friends Angel, Amy, and Jessica. We all flew out to beautiful Colorado. Super excited, we found this great Airbnb to rent in Snowmass Village, right near the Aspen Mountain Ski Resort. Honestly, my snowboarding experience was super limited. Just one time before this. Basically looping the bunny hill over and over. Let's just say I wasn't exactly a pro yet. First stop after landing, straight from the airport to our Airbnb via Uber. The place was perfect. A big 4-bedroom house. It had this amazing deck with a hot tub looking out over the stunning Colorado countryside. Since we got in pretty late, our first night was all about settling in and checking out a local bar, even though it was a Thursday. Day 1 on the mountains started bright and early. Ubering straight there, we rented our gear right at the resort to keep things simple. It wasn't too packed that first day, probably because it was a weekday. The next day, Friday, it got way busier, and I was really struggling to get the hang of snowboarding every single run down the slope. I ended up taking a tumble multiple times. Honestly, I was getting super frustrated. At one point, I just had to stop, and I sat down on the side of this blue run, which is longer and trickier than the easy green runs, just to catch my breath and take a quick break. Watching everyone, even little kids, zoom past me effortlessly was kind of humbling. Then this guy came along. He seemed to be having a rough time too, kind of like me. He stopped near me and asked if I was okay, trying to start a conversation. It felt like a really strange spot for small talk. After a few quick answers, I got up, said, "Nice talking to you," and pushed off to try again. Further down the slope, I needed another breather. To my surprise, I saw the same guy struggling his way towards me again. He stopped right beside me, unstrapped from the snowboard, and sat down a few feet away. Then he started saying how he wasn't used to seeing so many pretty girls like me around here. This was super weird, especially because I was bundled up in a ski mask and helmet. You could barely see my face. He asked who I was with. Feeling uneasy, I lied and said my boyfriend. He just laughed and said he saw me arrive with all girls. And I looked right at him, said "ew" really loudly, then got back on my board and took off down the mountain. Maybe it was the adrenaline from feeling weirded out, but I actually snowboarded better than I ever had before. I just wanted to get down fast. At the bottom, I went straight into the lodge, found a table, and called each of my friends. Amy picked up first. I explained what happened and asked her to come sit with me. She was there quickly.
I'd already texted our group chat suggesting we head out. It was around 3 p.m. anyway, and we'd been out for hours. Once Angel and Jessica finished their run, they met us back at the lodge. We returned our rental gear, caught an Uber back to the Airbnb, showered, changed, and headed out to the village for dinner. After dinner, we hit a few local bars and had a really fun night. Getting decently buzzed, when we got back, all 4 of us piled into the amazing hot tub on the deck, relaxing and having a few more drinks. Eventually, we called it a night and headed to our separate rooms to sleep. Now, I'm basically an insomniac. Even buzzed, I was wide awake, scrolling on my phone for over an hour, and looking back, that might have been the thing that helped us, because suddenly, I heard footsteps out in the common area, either the living room or the kitchen. The whole place had wood floors, so the sound was clear. At first, I thought it was one of the girls going to the bathroom or getting water, but then I heard it. The doorknob to my bedroom door twisting. I sat up fast, about to say one of their names, but stopped myself. Why would any of them be trying to come into my room like that? I quickly messaged the group chat asking who was there, and no one answered. They must have been sound asleep. I quietly tiptoed to the door and pressed my ear against it. I could definitely hear footsteps moving around out there. When it got quiet, I carefully unlocked my door, turned the knob super slowly, and pushed it open just a crack to peek out. I scanned the living room corners, then I saw it. A tall, dark figure moving from one bedroom door to another, definitely a man. He was trying to get into my friends' rooms. I wanted to yell out to warn them, but I was frozen, too scared to make a sound. I closed my door as quietly as possible and locked it again. I prayed everyone else had locked theirs too. 4 girls in an Airbnb. Of course we did. I called 911 right away, whispering everything to the operator. That's when I heard light knocking on my bedroom door. I stared at it, watching as the knob started to turn again, but the lock held. I kept whispering, "Please hurry," into the phone, and the operator assured me help was almost there and to stay quiet. Maybe the man heard me whispering because he started pushing against the door. I heard shoves, heavy thuds against the wood. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I screamed, "Get out of here!" And then, "I'm on the phone with 911 right now." The thudding stopped. Then a voice from the other side said, "Okay, sweetheart." I heard his footsteps walking away down the hall. The 911 operator told me firmly to stay locked in my room until the police arrived. I tried looking out the window, but it was pitch black outside. My screams had woken my friends. I quickly messaged them all to stay locked in their rooms. The police arrived maybe 5 to 10 minutes later. Since the front door was unlocked, they came straight in once they confirmed the intruder was gone and checked the whole place. They helped us make sure every door and window was locked tight before they left. Needless to say, sleeping after that was really tough. We all started talking, and the idea came up, could it have been that creepy guy from the mountain? The one who followed me down the slope? Honestly, it seemed possible. The voice kind of matched. We contacted the Airbnb host the next day, explained the situation, and worked out a partial refund. Instead of hitting the slopes again on Sunday, we decided to explore the area more calmly. That night, we stayed in a small, secure motel. We flew home safely the next morning. It was a trip we'll definitely never forget, for both the fun and the scary parts.
I once booked a small rental house in Arizona for a job interview. Since the company was pretty far from where I lived, I thought it would be a good idea to turn it into a short trip. I was alone, and honestly, the place was way cheaper than any hotel I could find. It was around 30 minutes away from the office, tucked into a quiet road that didn't really lead anywhere. The backyard faced a big open desert. Peaceful, at least on the surface. I brought my laptop with me to keep up with tasks from my current job, so during the day, I stayed busy. I planned to stay for 3 nights. My interview was set for Tuesday, which meant I arrived on Monday, had the interview the next day, and would be heading home on Friday. That first night, I was sitting in the living room around 9 p.m., preparing for my interview. I was looking up details about the company, practicing my answers, and reviewing notes on my laptop. That's when I heard something strange. A soft tap on the window behind me. Not a knock, just a light, quick sound like someone gently tapping their fingernail. I immediately turned to look, but it was so dark outside that I couldn't see anything. Still, it made my stomach twist a little. I tried to stay calm.
Maybe it was a bug hitting the glass. Arizona has plenty of strange insects. I convinced myself it was nothing and got back to studying. The next day, I went to the interview. I think it went well, and I felt pretty confident afterward. That evening, I drove around the town, checked out a few restaurants, and even relaxed in the backyard for a bit. The desert looked calm and endless, and the silence felt peaceful. But that night, something happened again. I was watching a show on Netflix when I heard that same tapping sound on the window, just once. But now it was clear. It wasn't a bug. This time I froze and I quickly moved toward the window and looked out. Still, nothing, just the dark desert stretching into the distance. I checked the windows and doors around the house, then opened the front door. Nobody. I walked through to the back and stepped onto the porch. There was complete silence out there. Then suddenly I heard something, a soft click sound, like someone making a noise with their tongue. It came from the desert, just outside the glow of the porch light. I looked out into the shadows. I couldn't see anything at first, but then I noticed a shape, a person, standing just far enough away to blend into the darkness. They were wearing dark clothes, almost invisible. I took a few steps forward, then stopped. Something about the way they stood there, not moving, watching, made me feel uneasy. I called out, telling them this was private property and they needed to leave, and I said I would call for help if they didn't go. Right after that, the figure turned and walked away quickly, disappearing into the darkness without a word. That night, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was that? Why were they there? Could it have been the property owner? I didn't want to assume anything, but it didn't make much sense. On my third and final night, I was lying in bed watching more Netflix before trying to sleep. I didn't hear anything for a while, but the whole time I kept thinking about that person in the desert. I finally turned off the screen and laid down. Then I heard it. Another click, but this time it wasn't outside. It came from inside the room, and it was faint, muffled. I sat up fast. The sound came from the closet. The door wasn't fully shut and it was open just a little bit. My heart started racing. Without even thinking, I jumped off the bed and ran outside in my pajamas. I got into my car, turned on the engine, and stayed in the driveway. I called for help, telling the dispatcher what I had heard and where I was. I kept my eyes on the front door, waiting to see if anyone came out. A police car showed up, and one of the officers checked the house with me. The place was small, not many places to hide. Still, I grabbed my things and left right away, and I booked a hotel nearby and stayed there for the last night. I contacted the rental company and the host, trying to explain what happened. I only got part of my money back, but honestly, I didn't care much about the refund. I just wanted answers. There were no signs of forced entry, and that made it even more confusing. If someone had been inside the house, maybe they had a key. Could it have been the host? Or maybe someone else had found a way in? I'll never know for sure, but I still think about that moment in the desert and that quiet sound from the closet. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to rob me. They weren't trying to hurt me. It was something else. They just wanted me to know they were there.
It was the Memorial Day weekend of 2021, and the world was slowly coming back to life after the long pause of the pandemic. Everyone seemed eager to celebrate, to escape the tension and just enjoy being around people again. That included me and my close group of friends. One of our buddies, Jacob, had access to something most of us could only dream of, his dad's massive boat. It was one of those luxurious ones with enough space to host a whole party, and Jacob, being who he is, often got to use it like it was his own. Born into money, he lived the kind of life that felt like a movie sometimes. But lucky for us, we got to enjoy the perks too. That weekend, there was this big boating event happening out in the bay. Dozens of boats were expected to gather in one shallow part of the water, where people could tie their boats together, hop between them, and hang out while standing waist-deep in the warm water, drinks in hand. So Tony, Mikey, and I met up at Jacob's place by the water. And from there, we all set out on the boat to join the meetup. Once we got there, it was everything we expected. Loud music, laughter, people clinking bottles and dancing from boat to boat. The energy was electric, and we joined right in. Drinks were flowing, and to be honest, we got carried away. And unfortunately, so did Jacob. By the time the sun started dipping below the horizon, Jacob had clearly had too much. We hadn't noticed how far gone he was until it became obvious he couldn't steer the boat safely. We told him to go lie down in the cabin, hoping he'd sleep it off. As night fell, one boat after another peeled away, heading back home. Eventually, ours was the last one left. Jacob was still knocked out cold, and the rest of us passed the time chatting, tired and buzzed. Hours passed. When he finally woke up, he seemed more alert. He took the wheel and started the slow ride back to his canal. That's when we noticed something strange. Another boat behind us had its lights on, trailing us quietly from a distance. Jacob immediately got anxious, and he thought it might be the water patrol. And considering how much he'd had to drink earlier, he started panicking about getting into serious trouble. We kept our speed steady, not too fast or too slow, trying not to raise any flags. We entered the narrow canal that led to Jacob's house. It's a no-wake zone, meaning boats have to move extra slow to avoid making waves. But that other boat didn't fall back. It kept following us, then getting closer as we cruised past the quiet houses. Jacob's nerves were through the roof, and he whispered about all the things that could go wrong. Losing his license, his dad getting furious, all of it. We decided to act like we hadn't been drinking, started hiding empty cans, and worked out a story just in case anyone asked. You could feel the tension on the boat. Finally, we made it to Jacob's dock. He did a surprisingly good job maneuvering the boat and parking it beside the dock. As we tied it up, the mystery boat pulled up alongside us. That's when we got a good look at it and realized it wasn't a police boat. It was just a boat, and standing at the back of it were 3 men all staring at us. Something about the way they looked, blank, unblinking, serious, made the air feel heavy. And Jacob muttered, "Who are these guys?" He said he didn't recognize the boat and knew everyone on this canal. None of the men said a word. They just stared as their boat slowly drifted past us. We tried to brush it off. Maybe they were visiting someone for the holiday. And that made sense. Kind of. Jacob kayed up the boat and said he'd clean up the next day. We went into his house. His parents were gone for the weekend, so we had the place to ourselves. Someone suggested a last-minute pool party, but it was already around 10 p.m., too late to get anyone else over. So we just hung around the pool by ourselves, talking and finishing the last of the drinks. But then less than 10 minutes later, we saw the same boat again. It passed by the house slowly. The same men were standing there, staring. This time, nobody said anything. After that, my memory fades. I guess the drinks caught up to me because I completely blacked out. The next thing I remember is waking up in the middle of the night. I was insanely thirsty. My mouth felt like sandpaper. I got up and stumbled into the kitchen to get some water, but as I walked in, I wasn't alone. There was a man standing there, dressed head to toe in black. Black clothes, black gloves, black ski mask, and in his hand, he was holding something. He told me to stay quiet. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just calmly said not to make a sound. My heart was pounding like never before. He asked where the owner of the house was. I whispered, "I don't know." He asked where the main bedroom was, and I, barely able to speak, pointed upstairs. He motioned for me to walk ahead with him right behind me. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed another man following behind him, both dressed the same. 2 of them now. They had me lead them to Jacob's room where he was still asleep. They told me to quietly wake him up. I did. Jacob's eyes opened, confused, but quickly saw the situation and froze. One of the men leaned closer to him and quietly demanded to know where the safe was. Jacob looked terrified but didn't argue. He led them to his dad's bedroom to a specific closet. They made him call his dad to ask for the combination. It was clear his dad didn't want to, but Jacob explained the situation. Eventually, he gave them the numbers. They emptied the safe. Cash, jewelry, documents, whatever was inside went into their bag. Then, without another word, they left the house. We didn't hear a car, no engine sounds, just silence. Later, we posted on every neighborhood app we could think of, shared camera footage, reported it, but nothing ever came from it. No one recognized the men, no one had seen that boat before. Looking back, it's pretty clear what happened. Those guys must have seen us at the bay, noticed Jacob's expensive boat, and followed us back. They waited, watched, and when they saw the lights go out, they made their move. That night changed something in me. I had never felt that kind of fear before. One wrong step, One loud sound, and who knows what could have happened.